Welcome to Kansas Ag Report. I'm Ken Rogers. On this week's program, our monthly conversation with Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law. We'll also have features from Kansas Corn, Kansas Farm Bureau, and Kansas Wheat, and the weekly update from the Kansas Livestock Association and market information from Pinion.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Kansas Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farm and ranch families since 1919, kfb.org. And the Kansas Wheat Commission, lending in the adoption of profitable innovations from wheat, online at kswheat.com.
In agricultural news, the American Farm Bureau Federation estimating 2022 crop losses due to weather and climate factors at $21.4 billion. The Farm Bureau Market Intel analysis shows that in 2022, 18 weather and climate disasters each had damages in excess of $1 billion struck the U.S. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reporting that 2022 was actually the third costliest disaster year, surpassing 2021, an estimated $165 billion in total economic loss. 2022, Texas suffered the most significant hit, over $6.4 billion incurred losses, primarily $2.9 billion in damages to their cotton crop. More than half of the ag losses were effectively protected under existing risk management programs, they say, with the remainder highlighting the importance of inclusive protections for growers of all crops in all regions of the nation. The Farm Bureau crop loss estimates do not include infrastructure damage, livestock losses, horticulture crop losses, or timber losses associated with those selected weather events. Well, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office this week requested technical consultations with the government of Mexico under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement. The consultations are part of the USMCA Sanitary and Phytosanitary chapter aimed at Mexico's ban of genetically modified corn. Trade Representative Catherine Tai said Mexico's policies threaten to disrupt billions of dollars of ag trade, and they will stifle the innovation that is necessary to tackle the climate crisis and food security challenges if left unaddressed. Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack also got in and said these consultations represent the next step in addressing the U.S. concerns with Mexico's biotech policies. He added, "We remain firm in the view that Mexico's current biotechnology trajectory is not grounded in service, which is the foundation of USMCA. The U.S. government's intention is that through the consultation process, USTR can reach an outcome that respects each country's sovereignty and benefits the U.S., Mexico, as well as U.S. agricultural producers and stakeholders." Also, earlier this week, USDA released a proposed rule with new regulatory requirements to the voluntary product of the USA label claim. The proposed rule allows the voluntary product of USA or made in the USA label claim to be used on meat, poultry, and egg products only when they are derived from animals born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the U.S. Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack said these proposed changes are intended to provide the customers with the accurate information that they need to make informed purchasing decisions. Vilsack announced the proposal at the National Farmers Union annual meeting that went on in San Francisco. We'll have more coming up in a moment.
The Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by Kansas Grain Sorghum, growers working together. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com.
And once again, it's time for our monthly conversation with Dr. Roger McEowen from Washburn School of Law. He is an ag and tax law specialist. Dr. McEowen, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Ken.
Well, here we are already into March of this year, and a couple issues that probably we should talk about. And one of those dealing with um, the soil fertility and then the quality of the soil. Uh, Maybe work on cropland, but what about grasslands and rangeland?
Yeah, well, let me just explain the concept first of all. We have a provision under the Internal Revenue Code that allows us to take a deduction for soil conditioners. And if we don't do that in the first year they're applied, we just take the cost of that and add it to the basis of the land. Well, that has led some to believe, and correctly, and the IRS has given us guidelines within which to do this about 30 years ago, that has allowed us to measure the fertility that's in the soil or have it measured by an agronomist. And then if there is deemed to be an excess, determined to be an excess above the average in that area for that soil, then we can allocate a value to that excess and amortize it over the life of that, which is typically about 3 to 4 years. And this deduction, if you get in some of the prime farmland, Ken, say up in Iowa and Illinois and Indiana, I can see this running 20 to 30% of the per acre value of that land. So if you have a 20,000 acre farm and you get a 30% allocation to excess soil fertility, that's $6,000 per acre. And of course, that's one of the things when we allocate value when a farm is purchased to depreciable items, it helps knock down the effective cost of buying that land.
Right. So with it, then so we kind of set it up. So then, what does that mean? Say to grass, because I know in some areas, grassland and pasture land are almost as as far as valuable as cropland when it
Yeah.
comes to what a producer might pay and invest in.
Yeah, on average, it's less, but you're right. In some
Yeah.
areas, it's approaching what non-irrigated in Kansas, non-irrigated cropland would be. But there's a difference in the nutrients in the soil when we compare pasture ground to crop ground. There's not the same level of nitrogen. There's not the same level of phosphorus. So it's going to be less likely that there will be an excess fertility level in pasture ground or rangeland or native grassland. And so if your baseline market value on the land to begin with, which is probably likely, you're going to then, by nature of the ground, have less that could be allocated to soil for excess soil fertility, if anything. And therefore, your deduction may not end up being worth what it costs to have the analysis done in the first place. That's the caution I would express to people interested in the concept.
Okay. Well, it's something we can sure talk about, and we'll at the end of our conversation we'll talk about. People can learn more about this and what you're
Sure.
writing about. So, Dr. Roger McEowen, Washburn School of Law, is joining us. Let's take a break. Back with more in just a moment.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Livestock Association, supporting members' business interests and meeting consumer demands. KLA.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. And Kansas Corn, building the future at kansascorn.com.
And joining us, Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law, and I'll talk with him every month about the different things, ag in the courtroom. This one, Dr. McEowen, uh, basically, it's what tantamount could be theft if you own property
Yeah.
and don't pay your property tax, and the sale happens and there's excess money. You may just be out of luck. Could that really happen?
Well, yeah, the key here, Ken, procedure, and it may take actually a number of years before you can get a clear deed to the property that you buy at a forfeiture sale, because we have redemption periods, in particular the farmland. So it may take 3 to 5 years after you get a tax certificate to actually get a deed to the property. And so those procedures are legitimate that every state has. I mean, if you don't pay your property tax, you could end up losing your property, and that's the right of the government to do that. But there's a question now coming from a case out of Minnesota that's currently before the U.S. Supreme Court. And the question is not that the states can do that, but can the states retain the surplus equity that the homeowner or the farmer has built up in that farmland above the tax debt? In other words, if I have a tax debt, I'll just give you an example of Nebraska case. The tax debt was $50,000. The 480-acre farm was worth 1.1 million. So the question is, once the property is sold and the $50,000 is pulled out to pay the tax debt, can the state just beg $950,000 or whatever the excess amount is, or does that need to go back to the landowner because that's the equity that they build up? Well, there's about a dozen states where under state law they're able to keep that surplus equity. And so now we have a landowner from a case in Minnesota where that happened to him. It was a lady in her mid-90s that this happened to her, and she's claiming that's an unconstitutional taking of my private property, and she's also claiming that under the Constitution it amounts to an excessive fine, which is unconstitutional. So we'll see what the Supreme Court says, but this can be really egregious. That set of facts. In fact, there was a dissenting judge in the Nebraska case that said that this was obscene. And since then, the Unicam in Nebraska did change the law on the notice provisions to make this much less likely to occur.
Wow. Well, those are two very interesting cases, Dr. McEowen. So you write about these, you blog about them on different articles. How can folks find these and maybe other things we've talked about before?
Well, two locations. One, I post them on my website, which is washburnlaw.edu/Walter, WALTR. And then also they're put on the Ag Manager website through the Department of Ag Econ at K-State.
All right. Thanks, Dr. McEowen. We'll talk to you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Roger McEowen, Washburn School of Law, has joined us. Stay with us. We'll have more coming up in just a moment.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Hi, my name is Rachel and I'm an agronomist at K-State. Today we're in one of the test plots that we have here at the university to talk about growth stages in corn and why they matter to farmers. So if you think about yourself in school, we have different grades that we have to go through in school, and each of those grades are associated with something that you should learn. That's our development of our brains. Corn develops in the same way, but we measure that through things called growth stages. And just like you have elementary school, middle school, high school, corn has two separate phases of its development: vegetative, which is like the plants you see in front of me, and reproductive, which would be these big tall plants here behind me. So at vegetative and reproductive stages, we're looking at different things to determine how developed that corn plant is. If we look at our vegetative plant down here, when we're staging vegetative plants, we're looking at the leaves. And you might look at this and think that you can see a lot of leaves. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 leaves that I can see. But the problem is that we don't count all of these leaves. Some of these leaves are still twirled up together in what's called the whorl, and those leaves we don't count as fully developed yet. In order to count a leaf, we have to see what's called a collar, which is this region right here where the leaf meets the stem. So if we see a collar, if that's flipped out like your shirt collar, kind of like the one I'm wearing today, if you have a collar, that's what we would count. So if we go all the way to the bottom, the first leaf in corn has a collar, and the end of that leaf is round and it's shaped like your thumb. So if you can find a leaf at the bottom that's round and shaped like your thumb, you know that you're at the bottom. So we would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 leaves with collars. This leaf doesn't have a collar yet, so we wouldn't count it. So this is a B6 plant. When we get to our stages like the ones behind me, we would start looking at the ears to determine how advanced that plant is. Now, why would a farmer care what stage their corn is in? Well, if we think about V stages, so the vegetative stages when the corn is still small, some important things for a farmer to know is if they need to spray for weeds. So if they have a weed problem, before the crop reaches stage V5, which would be 5 collared leaves, it's really important for the farmer to use herbicides to make sure there aren't any weeds that could compete with that crop to steal its light, its water, and its nutrients, because we're not going to harvest anything from the weeds and that would be a waste. If we have corn that is between V5 and R1, which is when the silks start coming out of the ear, that is the point when the plant uses the most nitrogen. So some farmers will give the plant nitrogen when they plant it, and they'll give it some more around V5 so that the plant can use that really efficiently to make sure that we're using our nitrogen environmentally well. If we look at our reproductive stages, some of the key things here are protecting our ears and protecting our leaves. So if we have insects that are trying to eat our kernels, because they're delicious, just like you like to eat sweet corn, insects like to eat the corn too. The leaves we need to protect because there are solar panels. They're collecting that light and turning it into sugar so that we can fill those ears. So we might use a fungicide to protect the leaves during reproductive stages, and we might use an insecticide to protect the ears during reproductive stages.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Spring is in the air, and so is the smell of freshly baked treats delivered by home bakers taking part in Bake and Take Month this March. Kansas Wheat encourages all to join in this tradition as a way to reconnect with others. The long-standing tradition of Bake and Take Month is a great way to spend time with our children and neighbors, as well as give back to those in need, said Cindy Falk, nutrition educator of Kansas Wheat. Whichever way you're able to observe Bake and Take Month this March, don your apron, take out your favorite recipe, and use this time to celebrate our relationships with our friends and our families and our communities. The premise of Bake and Take Month is simple. Bake something and share it with a neighbor, friend, or relative. Add even more meaning to the month by delivering them with a handwritten note or staying for an in-person conversation. Bake and Take Month started with Bake and Take Day in 1970 as a community service project of the Kansas Wheathearts in Sumner County. The Kansas Wheathearts, an auxiliary organization of the Kansas Association of Wheat Growers, set out to share baked goods with family members, friends, and neighbors and others, generating community goodwill. The idea of a community member sharing a favorite recipe with someone special was so successful that the Kansas Wheathearts created a National Bake and Take Day celebration in 1973, celebrated on the fourth Saturday in March. Although the Kansas Wheathearts disbanded in 2001, Kansas Wheat continues to support this tradition.
What if U.S. soybean meal were more than a commodity? If seed companies and the soybean checkoff built a better variety? That future is here. The time is now. To meet end-user demands, the soybean checkoff is investing in the compositional quality of soybeans, including meal. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
Margaret Gearing began serving the agricultural industry 54 years ago. She's impacted the future of agriculture by mentoring 4-H members, hosting farm tours, and was Harvey County Farm Bureau's first female president in 2014. Gearing has also provided livestock to small farmers in Mexico and educated them on care practices. Her passion for helping the next generation is evident through her volunteer efforts and humble service in her community. Congratulations, Margaret, and thanks for your tireless work.
What does a brighter, more sustainable future look like in our cities and towns, and how do we get there? When New York needed an alternative fuel source to reduce carbon emissions, the city found what it needed in biodiesel made from U.S. soybean oil.
For almost 40 years, Eric Atkinson shared news and information to Kansas farmers and ranchers across the airwaves as host of Agriculture Today, K-State Research and Extension's daily radio program. This summer, Eric unplugged the microphone after 39 years on the air. Eric is no stranger to agriculture because he grew up on a farm outside of Winfield. He got his start in the business by doing some radio reports in high school. After graduating from K-State with a degree in broadcasting, Atkinson worked in various other jobs in radio, communications, and even on his family's farm before he joined K-State's KSAC radio station in 1983. Eric had big shoes to fill after Paul DeWeese, the previous host of Agriculture Today, who had been known around the country as the Dean of Agriculture Broadcasters, died of a heart attack. Eric brought agricultural experts directly to the folks who needed the pertinent information through more than 9,000 shows, and never missed an opportunity to bring useful topics and news to Kansas farmers and ranchers. Now that he's retired, he's spending more time on his Wabaunsee County farm, cheering on the Wildcats, and attending local ag events. Congratulations, Eric, on your retirement, and thank you for sharing the news with Kansas farmers and ranchers.
Sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and LibertyLink that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.
The Kansas Livestock Foundation now is accepting applications for 2023-2024 scholarships. Applicants must be graduates of a Kansas high school and enrolled at a Kansas community or senior college for the fall 2023 semester. The Merck Cartridges for Cash program offers $1,500 scholarships to Kansas State University College of Veterinary Medicine students and $1,000 awards to undergraduates studying animal science and planning to be actively engaged in livestock production. Since Finney County KLA members turned the most cartridges in 2022, at least one student from that county will receive a Cartridges for Cash scholarship, providing there is a qualified applicant. Hempel Oil and Mobile Delvac will offer $1,000 scholarships to juniors and seniors at K-State and Fort Hays State University. Go Bob Pipe and Steel will sponsor a $1,000 reward for a student sophomore year or above attending a Kansas junior or senior college. Proceeds from the 2022 Kansas Cattlewomen Silent Auction and KLF Club Calf Sale will fund $1,000 scholarships. Awards in the amount of $1,500 will be offered in memory of Douglas A. Lau, a past chairman of the KLA Cattle Feeders Council. These will be awarded to junior or senior students at K-State or Fort Hays State. Glenn and Clyde Lindstrom scholarships in the amount of $1,000 also are being offered. A $1,000 scholarship will be offered by the Scott Johnson family to students attending K-State and pursuing a degree in animal science, ag communications, agribusiness, or ag economics. A $500 scholarship will be given in memory of Fred H. Woodbury from Quinamo. One application applies to all scholarships and can be accessed at kla.org. All materials must be digitally submitted by April 21st.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
Good day. I'm Derek Hermish with Pinion, a division of KCO ISOM. Volatile grain markets are the new normal, it seems. The good thing about true volatility is that it creates much more opportunity than flat markets. However, your opportunity to experience regret is much greater as well. For example, say you sell your soybeans on a 50-cent rally only to watch it go up another $1 the next week after you sell. Can you be happy about selling into the initial rally, or are you going to focus on what you missed out on? Regret should be the least of your concerns when it comes to marketing, but it can rear its ugly head in these environments and negatively affect decisions down the road. Selling your grain at profitable levels is the key. That's what you're always told, but it's never that simple. It is true that you will not go broke selling for a profit, but you're not in the business of making widgets for $1 and selling them for $2. Volatile markets provide opportunity, but they also provide opportunity cost. If you make a decision that nets you 50 cents less on average for your grain than your fellow neighboring farmers, nobody is going to offer you a discount on fertilizer or seed or equipment repairs to help you make up for it. Quite the opposite, as we've seen recently with inputs going higher. There are options, literally, that can be very useful in volatile markets. Yes, I am referring to puts and calls. I know there are many of you out there that are not fans of options. I talk to you quite frequently, and sometimes I agree with you. But in my experience, this is the environment to utilize them. If you'd like to visit with us about it, give us a call at 888-452-8751. I'm Derek Hermish. Have a good day.
That's our show this week. Be social with us online, KansasAgReport.net, or our social media channels. I'm Ken Rogers. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week on the Kansas Ag Report.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.